So, hello everyone. Very, very warm welcome. This is actually the final session in our series that we've been running across the month of June, called AI in Action. As I was just sort of saying to someone before we sort of started the session, if these have kind of been useful, if you found them sort of helpful, we can definitely look at running more of them in the future. So this is kind of the end of this current set, but obviously happy to do more of these if people feel they're valuable. This one is kind of all about productivity hacks, and I kind of included the hacks in sort of air quotes because I think you read a lot about things that are supposed to make your life so much easier, but often they don't always do kind of what they advertise. And so it's really just to add a note of caution that actually AI can be really useful for enhancing productivity, but ultimately it's dependent on your context and what you want to get out of it and the types of things it can do for you. So there's always that kind of little caveat in there. So again, for those who've not been to any of the sessions before, my name's Chris Webb. I work as a career consultant with the Careers and Employability Service, and I've been kind of writing, blogging about AI and career development probably for about the last 16, 17 months. So certainly kind of wouldn't describe myself as an expert in the technology, but someone who generally spends quite a lot of time tinkering around with this subject and this tech. And I'm also joined today, I'm really pleased to be joined by Tom Davenport, who's one of our graduates, one of our alumni from the University of Huddersfield. Tom, do you want to just introduce yourself briefly if you're here on microphone?
Yeah, sure. I did music production in the 2000s and loved my time at Huddersfield, met my wife there, and have been freelancing and building a business ever since. And maybe today share a bit about how we're using that. So yeah, looking forward to showing you what we're doing.
Fab. Thanks so much for joining us, Tom. So I'll explain in a second kind of the part of the session that Tom's going to be involved in. Tom and I had a conversation the other day, really interesting one, and to hear about how he's sort of been using AI within his business. And I thought it particularly helpful for this kind of final session to have some of Tom's insights as well. If you've missed any of the previous sessions, these are all now on the People and Organisational Development podcast channel, or pod podcasts, just for a bit of a wordplay there. So you'll find all of those uploaded, and the final session we're doing today will be on there, fairly shortly later in the week as well. So in terms of what we're going to cover, I'm going to whiz through the obligatory health warnings. We've kind of covered these in every session. I like to kind of use them to sort of foreground what we're going to talk about, but I'll just really won't spend too long dwelling on those today because we include them in all the other sessions as well. I'm then going to talk just really briefly about, I suppose, what we mean by kind of AI for productivity hacks and show you a couple of examples from my experience and from stuff that I've kind of been doing within my day-to-day job. And then I'm going to pass over to Tom, who's going to share some stuff from his experience and the work that he's been doing with his business. If we've got a bit of time at the end, we can stop for questions. If people want to stay behind afterwards, that's absolutely fine. But we are due to finish at past, so we will try and keep it as close to that finish time as we can. So yeah, in terms of the obligatory health warnings, again, I'm just going to whiz through these. Just a reminder that when you're kind of working with any of these AI tools, really important to kind of consider the following types of factors. Thinking about the guidance that's available from the university, so both the staff-facing and the student-facing guidance, which you can find on the links I've included on these slides. Thinking about the limitations, so these tools, this technology we're talking about is still very much frontier technology. It's developing, it's improving all the time. So there's still that element of needing that domain knowledge to check for inaccurate results or to check kind of what's being produced and how you're using that content. Because of course with quite a bit of that content, particularly sort of image content, there's bias that might be baked in there in terms of the data that it's been trained on. And because ultimately this has all been created by human beings, so we have our existing biases and stereotypes in there, and that can then sometimes be surfaced within the content that's created by AI. And of course, this is probably the big issue at the moment is around data privacy. It's still, for a lot of people, quite a murky area when it comes to AI. And it's one of those things where it's useful to understand, if I'm using particular AI tools, do I know what's happening with the data that's processed through those tools? Where does it go? Am I putting in stuff that's kind of personal to me or commercially sensitive? And if so, how do I mitigate that? And actually, I think Tom might have something on that front to mention later as well. Also important, obviously, to understand what's out there, so what tools are available. We've created this guide just with a very sort of basic breakdown of free and paid tools for use for different kind of use cases, so image creation, writing, editing, summarizing, etc. The caveat with all of this is that these change all the time. So we've got new tech, new tools appearing, sort of every week, really. A good example of that is ChatGPT 4.0, which is now free to use for any users. You don't have to have the paid account. And that's their latest model. Also allows you to use custom chatbots or custom GPTs, which we're going to talk a little bit about later. And I won't share this video now, but something just to have a look at if you're interested further down the line. This is the latest kind of video from Synthesia. So they do sort of AI avatars, and what they're kind of introducing for the back end of 2024 are basically some very, very realistic kind of avatars of yourself that you can train up to essentially appear at meetings for you, or to kind of be able to present videos or presentations. So all of these tools are kind of developing all the time, new tools being dropped, enhanced, refined, all these sorts of things. It's really useful to keep an eye out on what's happening. And of course, finally, we've talked about this sort of before, but it's really about understanding the role of AI for you as an individual, as a professional, and within your context. So, is AI going to be just an assistant for you? Is it going to pick up some sort of basic tasks that may be quite repetitive, that actually it's kind of almost tailor-made for? Is it going to be more of a co-worker with you? So you're going to kind of pass over some work to AI and then be the person who kind of checks it or ultimately takes that work on and sort of presents it? Or is it going to take on a slightly sort of different approach? So, we've talked in sort of previous sessions about this idea of AI agents developing, where you can actually set them off on a task. They'll kind of go away and do it. And you, as the kind of domain expert, are kind of placed there to sort of use that content and take that and kind of deliver it, I guess, however it needs to be delivered in your role. So lots of different ways that AI might influence our work, and hopefully these sessions are getting you thinking about that a little bit. So when we're kind of talking about sort of AI for productivity, again, air quote for the hacks, because I think AI can be really useful for some of the tasks we do on a day-to-day basis, but it also can produce some very generic stuff and not particularly useful stuff if we don't know, why we need to use it or how we need to use it. So I really like this quote, which I've used in one of the previous sessions, from Ethan Mollick, the author of Co-Intelligence. And he talks about kind of jobs being composed of bundles of tasks and fitting into larger systems. So, very unlikely that AI, particularly at the moment, is going to be able to do the entirety of someone's job, but there's certainly a fair chance it might be able to do parts of the tasks that you need to do on a day-to-day basis. And you might remember in the first session we had, if you attended this one, I mentioned about kind of trying something for yourself that's quite a good way to see where AI might fit in with your day-to-day work. And so this is basically a prompt that you can do yourself at home. It doesn't have to be on ChatGPT. It can be on any of those AI systems, Microsoft Bing, Google Gemini, Claude. And essentially you can just ask it. You can say, okay, I'm going to share with you details from the job description from my role. So I've done this for my role as a career consultant. I'm going to give you some tasks and subtasks, so the things that I have to do on a day-to-day basis, and I want you to explain how you would then achieve this, or the steps you take to do this. So this kind of does two things, really. It number one, sort of helps you to kind of understand how the AI breaks stuff down. So you might give it just, say, 3 very simple tasks as part of your job. For this one, I've just talked about the idea of creating career learning resources. So that idea of kind of planning, developing and creating different learning materials based on careers to use with students. And what it's done is it's kind of broken that down and said, okay, this is kind of generally how I would approach that task. So again, kind of helps you to know, how does it kind of assess the work that you're doing. But then the other thing that you can do with it is ask it, okay, well, which of these aspects of the job, now you've broken it down, could you be best suited to help me with as a co-pilot? And that's when it can start to kind of come back to you and say, actually, this part of your job, I might be able to help with, whether it's like developing templates, which we're going to talk about later, writing posts for social media, for example. And here are bits where maybe I can't help, or bits where maybe I don't have the capability to help yet. So it's not perfect, but it can give you that kind of initial snapshot of where might I want to use, or where might I need to use AI, or where might AI be particularly useful in my day-to-day work. So we'd really strongly recommend giving that a try if it's not something you've done already. What I'm going to do now is just show 2 really, really quick use cases of how I'm using AI for kind of more productivity related kind of tasks. So I'm going to show these 2 case studies on screen first, and then quickly switch to my screen to show you that live, and then pass over to Tom. So case study 1, I'm going to show you stuff on summarizing information. This is something that particularly with GPT 4.0 now, really, really useful and actually really accurate. So that idea of, analyzing something like a report, let's say there's been a really important report that's come out based on the type of work that you do. The one I'm going to show you is the Early Careers Survey from Prospects. It's an annual survey, super useful for career development professionals. They survey quite a large number. I think it's maybe close to 6,000, I think, each year of school leavers, graduates. And they ask them a bunch of different questions around things like work experience, well-being, career planning, and it gives that kind of snapshot of how sort of graduates are feeling sort of across the country. So they're usually quite long reports, and this is something where AI can be really useful for summarising, picking out key details. So I'm going to show you one of those. And of course, you could do that with internal documents as well, depending on the systems you're using and how comfortable or confident you were sharing that data there. So that's where I think the summarising side can be really useful. And I'm going to show you an example of that. And the second use case I'm going to show is around creating templates. So again, this is something where I think a lot of the generative AI tools are really well set up. So that could be setting up kind of a project plan, agendas for an event or for meetings, coming up with prompts for specific repetitive tasks, so things that you might have to do over and over again. And actually, it's quite useful for you to have, something that kind of creates 90% of that for you to then fill in maybe 10% of the detail, just as kind of a time-saving tool. So these are the two I'm going to show you, and then I'm going to pass over to Tom after that. Okay, so I'm just going to quickly move my screen share, and I'm going to come on to, hopefully you will see my browser in a second. And again, I might just ask someone to give me a really brief yay or nay if you can see this. Hopefully it should be coming through any minute. Team's definitely taking its time today. Okay.
Yay.
Yay! Excellent. Thank you. It's really helpful. So first example you can see on screen, this is what I was talking about in terms of summarising information. So this is taken from the Prospects Early Careers Research survey. What I've done is put a fairly simple prompt in. I've kind of asked it to act as my virtual research assistant. I'm going to share a report. I want the GPT, or want the system, to basically summarise the key points and pick out the key pages I would need to read to get that information. So what I've done is I've attached, which you can do on GPT-4o, the PDF from the survey. So this is publicly available information. Plug that into the GPT. And I've asked it for some key things. So I want to find out about, how prepared graduates are feeling for their future careers based on responses to the survey. That's something that they take every year. Benefits of work experience, another key category that comes up every year. And the biggest motivating factors for students in their careers. So that's always kind of quite a key trend people look out for. And what you can see is it's come back with very specific information based on the pages. Now, I used this tool probably about 8 months ago to try something similar, and it was really inaccurate. It returned some stuff that was just completely wrong, basically. I had to go through it and go, actually, well, that's not right. It's completely misinterpreted that. It's given me the wrong page number. I went through this afterwards, and it was absolutely on the money. Had all the page numbers correct, pretty decent summary of the key things that I wanted it to report on. And just gives you that great starting point in terms of picking out and kind of analysing themes that you might want to kind of take back and feed back. And of course, it doesn't sort of preclude you going into the report and looking in more detail, but it can kind of give you that overview, almost like that super executive summary that you would really have to kind of comb through normally to kind of find out. So it's almost like a way of interacting with a PDF or interacting with a document. And that I found can be kind of really useful, particularly when you're kind of trying to pick out key themes and trends. Pardon me. On a more kind of practical level, just on sort of the day-to-day from kind of the career service perspective, one way that we're kind of using this, which I think I've mentioned in a couple of sessions, that's been brilliant from a productivity perspective, is just using tailored prompts to generate practice interview questions built around key kind of themes of questions we tend to see at job interviews. So motivational questions, competency questions, behavioural or situational questions. And again, by kind of plugging in something that's publicly available, so a candidate pack, job description, what that does for us is it tends to plug out and kind of essentially output some really nice starting points that we can then edit if we want to, or use kind of directly in appointments with students. So that's just another example of something that kind of really speeds up that process of example questions for a practice interview. Obviously, we have that domain knowledge to be able to vet that and to pick out ones that we think are more or less valuable, but it really kind of speeds up that element of the work. And then the final thing I just want to show before I pass over to Tom is just custom GPT. So I think I mentioned kind of previously that now what you can do is you can access through this Explore GPT tab, even on the free version of ChatGPT, you can find these custom chatbots that have been created by people for specific purposes. Now, I pay for ChatGPT because I use it outside of work for other stuff. And I've actually kind of created a few myself that are really useful just in terms of kind of a specific use case, so that rather than having to plug in a separate prompt each time, it actually kind of knows what I want. So on the kind of back end of this, you can kind of plug in your own data, your own information. So, you might say, okay, here are some parameters, here's how I want you to speak. Here's the information I want you to draw from, maybe from our website. But what I've done with this one is it's quite basic. I've just asked it to essentially act as a bot for creating templates. So creating templates for the types of things that I might do at work. So an evaluation report or a project plan or a timeline, an agenda for a meeting. So what happens is every time I click on the chatbot, it will just come back to me and just say, this is what we're going to work on. It doesn't sift through everything else. It just has a very specific use case. And these are probably the type of thing that you might see more of as kind of we move forward in time, this idea of sort of specific chatbots created for particular use cases, very much around maybe kind of doing repetitive tasks, but kind of ask it to do the same thing over and over again with kind of a set number of parameters. So you can see here, I've asked it for a project plan for a series of one-day conferences. So I've just kind of made up a scenario. It's given me some questions. So this has all kind of been programmed in what I want it to ask me. And as I've kind of added the data, it's given me prompts to say, okay, this is what you might need to include. So can you share this information with me? Okay, I don't have all the information just yet. However, I can tell you about some of the topics. I've not figured out maybe the expenses. So could you create for me that template as a starting point? So this is where the GPTs and kind of generative AI tools in general can be quite helpful, because they can kind of give you that starting point, that template, to sort of produce what you might need as kind of almost like a blank space to fill in, but to do that in a much kind of quicker way than you might normally. So you can see here it's kind of created for me a bit of a table. It's quite basic, doesn't really look that functional. So again, what I've done is I've talked to it a little bit more. I've asked it to adapt it. So it's kind of based on the 3 different days of the conference. And then I've also asked it afterwards, once it's created that, whether it can do a spreadsheet version for me as well. And you'll see what it then creates is an Excel spreadsheet file or a CSV that you can then download. Now, a lot of these are kind of quite basic, but they are getting better. And so it's really worth kind of playing around. There's different tools you can download. There are different kind of types of AI sort of bots or tools that you can find that are specifically designed to create different things, whether those are templates, whether those are Excel spreadsheets, PowerPoint presentations. So it's really worth, if you've got the free version of ChatGPT, having a look on the Explore GPT, seeing if there's anything on there that allows you to kind of, I guess, create sort of starting points for some of the work you do that can save time in particular areas. And again, there's always that kind of caveat that, it's about thinking what you're putting into it. It may be that if it's kind of more commercially sensitive data, you're probably not going to be putting that into a kind of public chatbot or something on kind of OpenAI. However, if you're maybe doing that through Microsoft Bing, where the data is kind of localized, it might be something that you do instead. So this is kind of something where what we talked about in the last session around having those conversations in your teams and having conversations with people who are doing this type of work across the university is really useful to get that understanding of, when might it be appropriate to use AI for some of these kind of productivity enhancements, where might it be less appropriate. So I'm going to stop there, and I'm going to hand over to Tom, who's with us, who's going to talk a little bit about how he's been using AI on a productivity basis with his business. So Tom, over to you.
Thank you, Chris. Well, first of all, had a couple of challenges screen sharing. So if it seems to be booting me out of the conversation, if it does do that, I have the desktop app ready to go, and I'll rejoin promptly. So that should let it work. Chris, also, when I've got 2 minutes left, just interrupt so I can start rounding up, because
I will.
there's a lot of exciting things we could cover. So, okay. What's my context? I have a digital marketing agency. We work often in entertainment, not exclusively, but we do a lot in music and film. And I have compared to a lot of agencies, a small team. There's 9 of us, and we're fully remote. Very engaged with technology, of course. And as marketers, there's a lot of potential use cases for AI. There's many more than I could even talk about today, but I do want to allude to some of the ideas we've got and some of the tools that I'm using to explore this space, because I think one thing that I think for most people, their understanding or their access to AI is ChatGPT, and it's no wonder. It's an revolution, frankly. It's powerful, it's affordable, they've got a great interface, and there's been really nice developments. So their most recent announcements had GPT 4.0, which is excellent and fast and cheap, but the voice models that they said were coming are still delayed. And so, but here's what's good about that. There's a lot of competition. Anthropic, who make a competing product, have had amazing developments. If I get through what I want to, I will show you a couple of cool things that you can explore for free over there. And open source. Some of you may be a bit more techie. I'll point out a couple of more technical points here, but anything I talk about does not require those technical points. But my point is, open source is very active in AI at the moment. And actually a lot of the tools and a lot of the progress and a lot of the pressure on the big companies like OpenAI is coming from open source world. And that's good because it really democratizes the access to this stuff. And also opens better privacy, because some businesses may not want their data to go off to OpenAI. Let's get into some practical examples though. So there's two main things I want to show you. Well, first, let's see if I can share the screen. And if I disappear,
yeah.
then I'll be back shortly. So
Don't
just
worry.
tell me if you can see.
That is coming through perfect. Yeah, lovely.
Thank goodness. Okay, good. Well, okay. So the first thing I want to show you is, it is an open source tool. I'm going to introduce it just because I'm going to be in there, but it's exactly the same as ChatGPT. Actually, it has some better features. It's called Open Web UI, and it looks the same. Here is my chat. And I'll talk you through a couple of the features, but it's cool because you can set this up locally on your computer if you're a little bit technically minded, and you can access all these models for much cheaper. You don't have to pay the £20 a month. And actually, the reason I want to point that out is because for my team, if I had 20, or I think the corporate tier is 25 a month per head, we're talking over £200 odd to get my team on it, whereas actually this allows us to push it sort of straight to the API. So we're talking fractions of a penny per conversation. So actually our usage costs, even with our team hammering it, and I do hammer it, are not very high. The peak, I spent nearly $7 one day because I obliterate the thing. But across the team, we're not spending 200 a month. So that's amazing that you can get access to the same tools and the same power, and in fact with some better features. So it's free, other than the API costs. I've got this hosted on a server for my team, but you can run it locally. And I get a lot of the same features. So I can make essentially GPT. So I can make custom models. For example, here is a writing assistant. And as a former journalist, I've taken all the writing and style guides we used to use, and just very good English standards and lots of examples of cliches and stale words not to use. And that has allowed me to kind of strip out the giveaways that it is AI and just help it kind of have better standards. So I can still run GPTs. I can also, and I'm going to use this a lot in today's examples, but I can pre-save prompts. So I can kind of call up a prompt that has a certain set of instructions. For example, here is a strategy, like how we write a strategy memo. And so this is what I would do if I was writing a strategy. I would still go and work the document. I'm not going to do a strategy and give it out, okay? Work on some, really big campaigns, and that wouldn't fly. But I hate blank page syndrome, as I call it. It's why I'm not a journalist anymore. And it's really good. I think one of the really nice things about AI is it's really good at helping generate ideas and really kickstart and get you further forward so you can take it over the finish line yourself. In fact, I'm going to do a very quick demo with that one. Just want to say, you might be thinking, well, I don't have prompts savable in ChatGPT. That's fine. You can save these in a document, or however you want to organize. You could save it in Apple Notes or whatever on your computer, and you can just copy that and then paste it into the chat. So in fact, I could do that here. I could say copy, and then I'll start a new chat. I've got GPT 4.0. That's a nice thing in here, is I can choose from models beyond OpenAI. And I would normally pull it up with strategy. If I hit return, I have something in there that will pull in from my clipboard, and it will all be in there. So it would all pull up. But you can just paste in the prompt and then put your, the bit you want it to analyze. My tip is do it in double or triple quotes. So, content, and triple quotes, because then it knows that's the subject that the prompt is dealing with. Do you see what I mean? So it kind of, you know, puts a little fence around it. So I've got all the instructions on, hey, here's how we write a strategy memo. And then I would paste in my raw meeting notes, which in fact I would you know, I actually would process a bit with AI before, but you can just take raw transcription and then it would be in there and then it will go and give me a result. And in fact, I'm just going to grab one and I can't show you the details of the content. Oh, where am I? Open Web UI. So it should be, if I go strategy, it should be in the clipboard already. And now it's writing, I shouldn't actually show all that, but because it's sensitive stuff. But yes, basically there is, yes, it's writing a strategy memo. And yeah, sorry, because you can imagine it would write something with a useful structure. Let's give you a full workflow though, because I think one of the powerful things is when you chain together a series of processes. Okay, I love the quote. I forget who you quoted there, Chris, but that's exactly the way to think about it. Everything is kind of bundles of tasks or work packages. And actually, if you zoom out, a bigger system is comprised of smaller systems. So here's a problem that we've had at the agency. Someone on my team is a junior marketer whose job is to market us. Okay, because we've got great marketers, but they're all spending their time on clients. And so we need someone to help us kind of do our social media, do our blog. She's great. But she's, you know, maybe some of the challenge was, well, a lot of the expertise we want to convey is in the rest of the team. And so, yeah, she was writing articles, but maybe there was, you know, maybe the narrative structure or the shape of the article could be improved. Maybe the English could be better. She's good at English, but when you want to write with impact, you know, maybe there's ways we could improve that. And also, how do we get that expertise from team? And how do we do this quickly? Here's what we've done, okay? First of all, I think it helps to kind of draw a chain out. Have I got the drawing here? So something like this. So I've got these buckets and then I have a process that converts something from one bucket to another. You always want to think about an input and an output. And in the old days, you'd have to do codes to do the bit in the middle to create, you know, to process that data into that. AI does the bit in the middle very dynamically. Amazing. Okay. So now I can say, well, we've got ideas for blog articles. And I want you to interview the team about it. So the first step, we're actually using an external tool. So I'll just describe it. It scrapes other articles that are ranking in Google for the topic, and it will find the kind of headings and the keywords that they're using. And then that gives us, where is that? It gives us headings. And in fact, I've got the headings in my notes here. So it gives us headings. So let's say it looks something like, yeah, let's say it looks something like this. Article about a UX audit, user experience audit. It gives us these headings, okay? So now she's got the headings. Let's go into AI and do the rest of the process, okay? So I've got these prompts, and they are things like write article, write questions, and it will, you know, to write an article like, hey,
2 minutes, Tom. Sorry,
2 minutes. That's fine. I can wrap up with this. It will get fast from here. So you'll interview, here is an interview with experts, here's our values, here's the English standards, and so on. So how much quicker have we got our assistant at doing this? So let's check. I've got the questions copied. So she's got the questions helped by AI, or the headings, and now I need to write questions. So it's quick. What's the question prompt again? Questions.
Is it under generate interview questions?
There it is. Sorry, generate. Goodness me. I need to, yeah, I need a better taxonomy on the names here. Okay. So, right. /generate interview questions. It's pulled it in. And so now it's got questions. She takes these, interviews the team, and we transcribe that in Google Meet. So now we've got the whole conversation with me answering those questions. And now I've copied that. So now I can say write article, and it's going to write up the article based on the substance of the expert content. And then after that, there is also a /edit. So I would copy the output of that one. And then there's actually one that gives editorial feedback to help it improve a little further. So there you go. Like, it was taking far too long. The standards weren't there. So I think if I've got 30 seconds, I'll say, you can make your own prompts. Okay. If you were to say, for example, I'm writing I'm writing dissertations or reports to submit, I could say, write a master prompt for a university tutor giving feedback on my assignments. So this will give you a prompt that you could use. It's writing it as if it's a question, but essentially you could, use AI to give you a prompt that then you save and you paste in your work, and it could give you maybe constructive feedback, maybe something tutors could produce for their students. So there's more I'd love to show you, but there's some very cool things when Chris mentioned agents, where you can actually have teams of AI working together, where you actually have multiple AIs kind of bouncing off each other. And it's amazing because they can actually almost prompt each other. They work through a chain of work. And I won't show you now, it is a little slow because they have to produce it each, but you can have it writing software and then testing or writing the documentation. And obviously there's a lot of potential, but the key is think about the output you want, think what inputs you have available, and then just be descriptive in getting that output. And if it doesn't give you the output you want, you can refine that prompt. And that's the key, because then you build a library that can be very productive. And yeah, that's my top tip. Build your library of prompts
fantastic.
so that you can work quickly.
That's brilliant. Thanks, Tom. And I think you segues really nicely with a lot of the stuff we've been talking about in this series around kind of understanding what you want to get from the system and where it might intersect with your work. Because exactly as you say, it's very much about inputs and outputs. And of course, you're not necessarily going to know what inputs or outputs work best until you've kind of done a bit of that scoping about, well, actually, where my AI intersect with my work, or where perhaps am I doing something like you said, I've got a problem at the moment that actually it's been taking too long, or we feel it takes too much staff time. Is there a way that we can kind of accelerate that or essentially increase the efficiency of that process? So great examples to share. I appreciate that we are we're a little bit over time, so I do apologize if that's on me for starting a little bit late. So just before we go, again, just another reminder, things are changing all the time. Tom's given some great examples there about that idea of sort of agents and I guess workflows, but also sort of the fact that a lot of these AI tools can now sort of do multiple things in the background at the same time. I've included a video on here of some of the stuff that's happening with Claude 3.5, which now has got like a preview tab, basically shows you what it's doing with the code in the background, which is quite funky. But very much as Tom said, it's kind of alluding to that direction of travel that AI is going in, this idea of having multiple agents kind of in the background, being able to run different programs and connect with different use cases sort of to produce content or to solve problems. So that's kind of really sort of taken us to the end of this session. I will definitely stay on the call if anyone's got any kind of questions. As always, do have a think about anything we've been talking about, how you feel maybe this sort of stuff could impact aspects of your work, and I guess maybe how you could start experimenting with some of these tools to have an impact on that. And if you do want to catch up with any of the previous sections, do check out the podcast channel. Everything is on there. And do drop me an email if you've got any kind of general questions or any sort of feedback, anything you want to follow up about in relation to these sessions. We will be sending out slides and recording shortly afterwards. If you want to stay on the call briefly, that is absolutely fine. And if not, hope you all have a great day, and we'll see you all soon.